Welcome to the 24th State of the City Economy Conference. It's our pleasure to welcome all of you here. I'm Greg Clark, and it's a great honor for me once again to be your onstage host for this very, very, very important event. Now, as all of you know, we're living in very challenging times. But in challenging times like these, leadership is what is called for, and that's what we intend to provide to you this morning. We're going to have, as usual, all of the interactive activities that we're used to. So if we could see the next slide, please. I want you to get out your mobile phones or your other devices. Make sure you've joined the Radisson Guest Wi-Fi system. And then I want you to go to Slido and to use the code for the event, hashtag SOCE, State of the City Economy 2022. This is the 24th time this conference has been hosted. Please log in to Slido and get ready for some interaction in a minute. We have an exciting agenda for you. Let's have a look at our agenda, if we may. So, in just a moment or two, I will be introducing Councillor Susan Aitken, the leader of the City of Glasgow, and we're looking forward to Susan's keynote address. We'll have a panel discussion that looks at Glasgow's innovation economy, what's happening in the new sources of entrepreneurship and job creation. Colleagues down the side of the room, loads of seats over here. Come over. This is the best time for you to come. Please don't languish in the corridors. Come and get a seat. Following that first panel, we're then going to ask you a question about Glasgow and its entrepreneurship, and then we're going to introduce our second keynote speaker of the day. That will be Mark Logan, the Chief Entrepreneur of Scotland. We look forward to giving him a massive welcome, where he'll talk about Startup City, Startup Nation. And then a second panel where we'll look at Glasgow as an innovative city. What are we doing at the level of place leadership, city systems, to make this just the best place to be, even in these very challenging times? And then, of course, we'll have a second panel that will conclude on that. And then we aim to conclude the whole event by 12:15, and my task is to keep us on time, so I'm going to rush along as we go. Let's go back to Slido then, and we're going to do a little bit of a practice session now. There's going to be 3 polls for you. I wonder if we could have poll number 1, please. Poll number 1. So today is the 24th State of the City Economy Conference. How many of the previous 23 have you attended? 0 if this is your first, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 22, and there's a special category for people who've attended 23 times. Please vote now. Are we able to see the vote emerging on the screens as this happens? Looking to our colleagues at the back of the room. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So votes are coming in. You can see 91 people have voted already. Let's say a very big welcome to the nearly 40% of the room who are attending this conference for the first time. Let's give them a round of applause, if we may. I wonder if we could just scroll down on the screen a little bit to see how many people have been here 23 times. There seems to be 4. Can't quite see that at the moment. There we go. Keep going. No, we can't see it because the console's in the way. Okay, so 2%. We know their names. Good to have you back again. Let's give them a round of applause. So welcome everyone to the conference. As you've heard, it's the 24th occasion. The conference is really something very special. Let's go to question number 2, please. So we really want to know, as many of you know, the Kelvin Hall studios have recently been refurbished. They're now reopened. What is the first show to be recorded in the new Kelvin Hall studio? Do you think it's Michael McIntyre's The Wheel? Is it Richard Osman's House of Games? Is it Blankety Blank? Is it Frankie Boyle's New World Order? Or is it Pointless? Please vote now. I'm glad to see so many people are still fans of Blankety Blank, aren't you? I mean, it's a fantastic show. Shame about Sir Terry no longer being with us. The answer to this question will be revealed later, and we look forward to the moment where that comes. Let's go to question 3, please. Which of these famous things was not invented in Glasgow? One of them was not invented in Glasgow. Was it the television? Was it the cash machine? The telephone? Chicken tikka masala? The fridge? Or antiseptic? Which one was not invented in Glasgow? That's very interesting. Beginning to emerge. So nearly half of you think the cash machine wasn't invented in Glasgow. A third are saying it's the fridge. 10% think it was antiseptic. Very interesting. The one of these inventions that was not invented in Glasgow, we'll reveal this to you later on. Okay? So right at the end of the conference. So there's all the motivation that you need to stay. So with all of that, this is a reminder that during all of the panel discussions and following the keynote speakers, we'll use Slido to generate all of the questions. We ask you not just to propose questions, but also to preference the questions that you like, and that way I will put the questions that you want to see answered to our panelists. So please get ready and start doing that. The answers to the last 2 questions, I say, will be revealed during the course of the morning. And with that, it's my great honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker, our host, the leader of the City of Glasgow, Councillor Susan Aitken.
Good morning. Friends, we meet for this 2022 State of the City Economy Conference during economic conditions as difficult as have been seen in my lifetime. Households, communities, businesses, public, private and voluntary institutions are all facing a combination of pressures that put well-being and livelihoods at stake in a way that we just can't understate. And as I look at media coverage of yesterday's autumn statement today, the word I see repeated most often is pain. For many organisations and businesses, the threat is existential. For citizens, tens of thousands in this city alone are living with daily financial worry and fear. As inflation rates spiral, so too does child poverty and fuel poverty. People who work hard to provide for themselves and their families, who contribute to society in countless ways, now find their earnings don't cover the basic cost of living. Many of our citizens are already experiencing cold and hunger. I could, in truth, spend my entire allotted time this morning talking about the impact of this economic crisis on our city, but you are all intelligent people. You already know what's happening in the world and the country, and many of you will yourselves be grappling with the consequences. I'm also not going to spend time listing my demands of national governments, though I've got plenty, believe me. I suspect that many of you already know my views about austerity, about Brexit, about the fundamental necessity of strong public services, and if you don't, you can probably guess. My job as city leader at this event is to help us understand what will get Glasgow through this in the best possible shape to support our economy, our businesses, our environment and our people, to survive, to recover and to thrive. And for our ambitions for Glasgow, not simply to remain on track, but for delivery of them to be accelerated towards tangible outcomes. One reason why I still think that city leadership is one of the best jobs you can have in politics is because of its ferocious practicality. No matter how big the challenge, it's simply not an option to throw up your hands and walk away. There are services to deliver, citizens to support, a city to keep going. And so the job is about constant problem solving, solution finding, discovering ways through and around, even if they are imperfect or partial. And to constantly mine for nuggets of gold, those positive strengths and assets that can be amplified, disseminated and grown to build our defences and to keep the city standing when crisis hits. And the fact is that despite all we face, it's not been difficult to bring a positive story about Glasgow's economy to you today. Those gold nuggets can be found the length and breadth of this city, and they are shining brightly. I had the pleasure recently of meeting Ricardo Houseman, who is, among his many roles, Director of the Growth Lab at the Centre for International Development and Professor of the Practice of Economic Development at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. And he was discussing the post-pandemic economic situation for cities, and he spoke about finding opportunities for sustainable and inclusive economic growth in the adjacent possible, or to put it in my more basic way, through identifying and building on existing strengths and assets. The more complex and diverse an economy, the more adjacent possibles are created. And as Professor Houseman was talking, I was, as usual, thinking about Glasgow. And to say his analysis resonated with me is to put it mildly. We sometimes bemoan the complexity of Glasgow's economy because the sheer number of things going on can make it difficult to summarise, particularly for external audiences. What exactly is Glasgow's economic USP? It wasn't always that way, of course. It was once easy to sum up what Glasgow did. We were the workshop of the world. The term Clyde built the hallmark of high-quality, large-scale manufacturing. But we all know the consequences when that ended. Glaswegians still live with them today. So while modern Glasgow's economic complexity might be harder to describe, seen through the lens of Ricardo Houseman's analysis, it is in itself one of our greatest strengths. Our complexity not only builds in resilience, it also creates those myriad adjacencies and possibilities for growth. And I suppose that's really what this state of the city economy is about. Glasgow's regional economy does remain one of the UK's most diverse and most competitive. Many of our sectors continue to perform strongly, not least our knowledge-based economy. The ICT sector grew by almost 50% in the past 5 years, while an additional 10,000 jobs have been created within the professional and scientific sectors. Regional GVA per head now sits at £32.60, second only to the west of England among comparator regions. We've been named the 13th most sustainable city in the world and the second greenest UK city to invest in. We're the fourth biggest place for FDI outside London in the UK in the past year, creating 16,040 new jobs underpinned by hundreds of millions of pounds of capital investment. JP Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley are both increasing their workforces in the city. We're the second best city in the UK for innovation and one of the fastest growing emerging tech economies in Europe, attracting a record £110 million of investment in sectors including biotech, pharmaceuticals, energy, space, fintech and real estate. Glasgow's vision in delivering 3 innovation districts, the importance of innovation to our regional economic strategy, and the world-leading research, talent and knowledge at our universities and colleges have ensured we are one of just 3 UK regions to secure government funding to take this work to the next level. In our case, the £33 million to progress the Innovation Accelerator programme will hugely enhance Glasgow's national and global reputation as a place where innovation gets done. And from our 2 expert and esteemed panels today, you'll get a sense not simply of the strength of the technical innovation flourishing across the city, but also how Glasgow innovates in our approach to relationships, problem solving and creating opportunity. Maritime Innovation UK has established its base here in Glasgow. From seabed mapping to green energy ships, they're focused on driving sustainable economic growth through innovation in that sector And this is an area that the Clydeside can once again be a global leader in. Add to that the welcome announcement earlier this week that BAE Systems have been awarded a further multi-billion-pound contract to build another 5 frigates on the Clyde, supporting thousands of jobs and securing BAE Systems facilities in Scotland into the 2030s. We are also the first region in Scotland to take an evidence-led, mission-based approach to developing both our regional and economic strategies. Our guiding mission is to have the UK's most innovative, inclusive and resilient economy by 2030. To achieve that, we need to deliver against our 3 grand challenges: poor productivity, ensuring inclusive economic growth, and the climate emergency. We know, for example, that the City region has over 100,000 long-term sick and economically inactive residents, and that better engagement with employers to keep people in work is something that other cities have more success with. Embedding a systemic, focused approach to addressing this generational problem and others like it is a key priority for me. That's why we are committed to supporting fair and healthy work, including partnership with the Health Foundation on embedding health planning within all of our capital projects, and with a refreshed employability programme launching in April, offering support to all ages. We are committed to Glasgow City region becoming the first living wage region in the country, using our procurement power to generate far more local economic growth. And we know that Glasgow's relatively low levels of business startups are a perennial weakness. In 2020, 6,480 businesses were launched in the Glasgow City region. If we were to match the rates of Greater Manchester, that number would have been over 11,000. So to address this particular mission, I'm delighted to announce that Glasgow has begun work with experts from the Bloomberg Philanthropies Foundation and Harvard University to design an innovation challenge to increase the numbers of and support given to new entrepreneurs in the city, particularly women and BAME entrepreneurs. Joining a team of officers from across the council will be partners from Scottish Enterprise, the City of Science and Innovation and our universities to work with Harvard researchers to design, implement and monitor the impact of a range of approaches to unleashing the dormant entrepreneurial spirit that we know lies just under the surface in Glasgow's communities. And this work will align closely with our forthcoming community wealth building strategy. I hope at next year's State of the City I can update you about the launch of all sorts of brilliant new enterprises in Glasgow's communities. And this is a subject, of course, on which our other keynote speaker today, Mark Logan, Scotland's Chief Entrepreneur, is particularly expert. And I really look forward to hearing Mark's insights. Last year's State of the City economy took place just weeks before COP26, a moment of unprecedented international profile for Glasgow. The finer points of the Glasgow Climate Pact and whether COP27 is going to deliver progress when it closes today or tomorrow are subjects for a standalone conference. But I can say for certain that the climate emergency is firmly established as one of the grand challenges for our economic strategies to address, and that Glasgow is now seen by the world as a globally leading city on climate action. That was made very clear to me during my visit to COP27 last week, and that reputation, alongside our superb organisation and staging of the event itself, is already a crucial legacy of our hosting of COP26. We've created a momentum that we simply can't afford to let slip. Agendas championed by Glasgow as host in 2021 are now front and centre in climate discussions in 2022, and it hasn't been forgotten by COP attendees that for many of them, the first time they heard substantive arguments for the direct financing of cities to deliver climate action was in Glasgow City Chambers or at one of our many digital lead-in events. I was a founding board member of the City's Commission for Climate Investment, which is now known by the snappier title of 3CI and chaired by our host today, Greg Clark. Having 3CI behind us gave Glasgow even greater credibility with major institutional investors at COP27, some of whom represented funds worth trillions of dollars and euros waiting to be invested in long-term net zero transition projects exactly like those in Glasgow's Greenprint for Investment. It's beyond doubt that we're ahead of the curve in moving ever closer to understanding how to deliver investment-ready propositions of the scale and quality that these institutional investors are seeking. And I'm very pleased to be able to announce that I returned from COP27 with a new partnership that will provide us with crucial assistance on that journey. Glasgow will be one of the first cities to take part in a global risk and resilience fellowship, a partnership between an international insurance broker and one of the global cities networks that Glasgow is engaged in. And it will see a senior insurance professional seconded into the City Council to help us get our Greenprint and other infrastructure projects insurance and investment ready. It's a collaboration that could prove a real game changer for our net zero transition. The skills required to deliver all of these projects are crucial and are just really starting to be identified and mapped. Our Just Transition and Skills Action Plan will be published in the coming week, and it will map out our approach to upskilling and reskilling across all sectors, including those not perhaps traditionally seen as green jobs, like healthcare and construction. Last year, I announced a package of support for SMEs grappling with the climate emergency. These green business grants have now been launched, and I encourage all SMEs to explore the Green Business Support pages on the Council website to see how we can support your transition to net zero. From last week, SMEs can access dedicated grants of up to £10,000 to cut their emissions and costs, jointly addressing the climate and cost of living crises. We've paired that with dedicated advice, and we've trained our business advisors to help businesses access it. We've also started delivering the Step Up to Net Zero programme with the Chamber of Commerce, helping businesses harness the opportunities of the circular economy. Transitioning Glasgow to become a net zero city within the next decade is an environmental and a moral imperative. But done right, it's also our city's greatest opportunity for social and economic transformation. At the same time, accelerating the pace of change when budgets are being severely squeezed and costs are escalating daily is far from easy. A commitment to continued investment in those long-term drivers of success, skills, infrastructure, competitiveness, they are going to be crucial. And we need to get better at understanding the value that existing and new investments in these areas bring. So our intelligence hub that was set up in 2019 is absolutely essential to this work, providing the necessary evidence to build economic capability and capacity, informing strategies and policies, and making the cases for investment. Our city centre remains in a period of transition. The commitments by Sovereign Centros for the St Enoch Centre and Landsec at the Buchanan Galleries point towards a transformation of our city centre and in a huge show of confidence in its resilience and also for the vision we have for it. However, fundamental structural changes like the inexorable rise in online retail, the growth of teleworking are accelerating, and the aftermath of the pandemic continues to have a heavy impact, particularly on retail and hospitality, those elements of our foundational economy. Alongside the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, therefore, we've commissioned 2 reports to better understand both the impact of the pandemic on the city centre economy and long-standing issues facing our property sector. The first will explore the future of the city's retail core, creating a vision and action plan to respond to and shape the impact of changing retail and leisure trends, growing city centre living, and the potential contribution of significant redevelopment proposals like those I've just referenced. The second, undertaken by Rydon, provides a post-pandemic stocktake of property supply and demand and recommendations for future policy interventions. At the present time, Glasgow has around 400 obsolete buildings built before 1960. Yet the report points to a need for smaller, higher quality, more agile offices across larger occupiers, SMEs, startups, creatives and innovation industries alike. A clear case for repurposing. So today I'm announcing the creation of a task force to develop a repurposing action plan to respond to these recommendations and determine the steps that Council and other partners need to take to bring these buildings back into productive use, and that will report early in the new year. Glasgow's capacity for renewal is unending. Few buildings in Glasgow illustrate that, like the Met Tower. A city landmark for almost 60 years, the Met was once a beacon of a new Glasgow, a symbol of our progression from heavy industry to embracing international modernity. It's B-listed and still, I believe, one of the tallest non-residential buildings in the city. But the Met was no longer fit for its educational purposes when it closed nearly a decade ago, especially with the construction of the new City of Glasgow College across the road. And since then, of course, its chief purpose has been as the bearer of our city brand, that bold pink people make Glasgow visible from miles around. In May this year, the Met Tower was purchased by investor and developer Bruntwood SciTech, who will transform the tower into a hub of R&D spin-outs, startups and scale-ups, offering opportunities for collaboration with hundreds of tech and science businesses and access to specialist support, and with the location that offers access to world-class learning institutions. But it also makes the Met a potent symbol, again, of our changing economy and of our changing city centre, one home to new industries and new purposes. For 21st century challenges and opportunities, Glasgow's past offers us those modern solutions. Kelvin Hall is another landmark building that has, over its 100 years, been an exhibition space, a sports arena, a museum, hosted a carnival, a circus, and been a storage base. In recent years, it had been searching for a new purpose. When I started this job in 2017, our screen sector was one of the strongest on these islands. Home to 2 national broadcasters and a thriving independent production base, we also had a solid record in attracting major television and film productions. The Channel 4 hub that we secured in 2018 introduced a further catalyst to grow and sustain that sector. And indeed, a recent report by Screen Scotland highlighting the economic value of Scotland's film and TV industry revealed that Glasgow accounts for 45% of direct employment and 49% of direct GVA within Scotland's screen industries. Film and TV helped generate almost £215 million for the Glasgow economy in 2019, equivalent to 3,720 full-time jobs. But we knew from ongoing engagement with the sector that there were still missing elements that could really take that potential to a new level. And topping that list was studio space. We knew that BBC Studio Works were on the hunt for a new facility, and the opportunity presented by Kelvin Hall led to the Council and the Scottish Government investing in the repurposing of part of the building as studio space. The first production is underway, and to answer one of Greg's questions earlier, and very appropriately given the local connection, it's Frankie Boyle's New World Order. Of course, Glasgow will continue to seize new opportunities in new sectors. The story of our modern economy shows what can happen when we do so. An emerging example is the fashion industry. which has long been negatively associated with poor sustainability practices and exploitation. But as business models in the textiles world have begun to shift, Glasgow's recognised the opportunity for building and growing the manufacturing capability within that sector, reducing carbon footprints and financial risk, and making a positive impact on our own economy. Council colleagues are in continuing discussions with the UK Fashion and Textile Association about the City region becoming a major player in the sector, and I'm delighted this is an opportunity that partners, including SDI, the University of Strathclyde and the Scottish Government, are also engaged in. Over the next few months, we'll develop an industry-led partnership, an approach that Glasgow's got a strong and successful record in, to take forward that opportunity. And of course, digital remains fundamental to our changing economy and delivering on Glasgow's potential. A sector already of significant value, tech startups and scale-ups are worth more than £2.6 billion to the regional economy. It's an area the Council's perhaps not been as quick to engage with as we could have been, but our work with Dealroom in the past year is making up for lost ground. Founded in 2013 in Amsterdam, Dealroom provides local intelligence and data on startups, SMEs and high-growth companies. Companies can create a profile to put themselves into the shop window, learn about what's happening in the city and connect directly with investors, a kind of tech Tinder, if you will. Already in place in cities in Berlin, including Berlin, Helsinki, Oslo and Lisbon, Glasgow will be the first UK city to have our own bespoke platform. Through investment of our own resources, the Council's ensured that the platform will stay free of charge for companies to use, and it launches this very morning at glasgow.dealroom.co. I would encourage all companies that are in this space to create a free profile and use it for the insight and investment that can take your business to the next stage. I mentioned earlier the work the Council's undertaking with Bloomberg Philanthropies and Harvard University to boost entrepreneurship. And that's come about through my own participation in the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative, an annual programme of learning, development and support for city leaders and their teams. I have to say it's a real thrill to be part of the Bloomberg Harvard class of 23, and the wider opportunities that the programme's opening up for Glasgow are more exciting still. It's no bad thing for anyone to go back to school once in a while, and the learning that I've gained from the teaching and from working with 39 fellow city leaders from around the world has been endlessly challenging and inspiring. One of my classmates is Mayor Roy Lowe of Banjul in the Gambia. In one of our sessions, she talked about the challenge of simply knowing how many children and young people she has in her city, where they live, and about how she's now using community networks to help map them. And the rest of us in our group immediately defaulted to asking questions from our perspective on youth issues. Was this about keeping kids off the street and out of trouble, for example? But Mayor Lowe explained that she needs to know where her young population are, because girls are being taken out of the city to have female genital mutilation performed on them. And she needs to know where they are in order to stop it. That conversation was an electrifying moment for me. And I tell you about it today, not to suggest that we have it easy in Glasgow in comparison. All of our experiences are shaped and determined by our own contexts, after all. But because it's such a powerful illustration of that ferocious practicality of cities that I spoke about earlier. Faced with such a profound and horrifying problem, and with the odds so seemingly stacked against her, Mayor Lowe's response is to get to work alongside willing members of her community, even if it starts off with just one girl at a time. Glasgow's challenges are of a different order to Banjul's, but they're no less profound in impact, and they too can sometimes feel overwhelming, especially when they're made worse by conditions that are beyond our control. But the toughest of times make it even more important that we too get to work to find solutions, even if that means sometimes making the best of what we've got. But I hope I've been able to show you today that what Glasgow's got is actually pretty great. I've said before in my time in this job that the stock phrase, the business community, has taken on a new meaning for me. I've seen that Glasgow's business community really does function as a genuine community, resilient and with a strong sense of place and of civic pride and responsibility. It's a business community that is part of the wider community of Glaswegians. And so I've got an ask of you today, and that's to help harness all of the assets your community brings towards our collective, ferociously practical city response to this moment of crisis. I know that for so many of you, much of your energies just now will be focused on survival, on just getting to the end of each day with the lights still on, literally. But if you've got a spark of energy left, and if anything of what I've talked about today has resonated with you, please come and talk to us. Could you benefit from the Green Business Grant or Step Up to Net Zero? Do you know a business that could? Could you make use of our new Deal Room platform? Do you know a natural entrepreneur who isn't even aware yet that they are one? Does your sector have an adjacent possible that we can work together to realise? Leadership can take us far, but community will always take us further. Let's work together to make the best of what Glasgow's got. Thanks for listening.
Susan, you began by recognising that the sober and challenging times that we're in, but you said that you love the job because it allows you to be ferociously practical in pursuing what Glasgow needs. And you talked about the opportunities that come from moments of crisis like this, focusing very strongly on the progress that's been made in the economy over the last years, including its diversification, the adjacencies, the co-benefits, the resilience that's now here. And you went through all of the statistics on the amazing strength with which Glasgow enters this very difficult period. You talked about launching a mechanism to focus on the repurposing of buildings, particularly for the new kinds of city centre uses that are needed post-pandemic. Of course, you mentioned what's happening now at the Met, and we'll hear about more of that from Brunswood. You talked about how Kelvin Hall is now working again as a great convening venue in the screen industries. You talked about the Tech Tinder, the Deal Room, and in a minute we'll ask everyone if they've already joined Tech Tinder and see if we can have some meetings occurring right here. We're going to go immediately to our first panel now, ladies and gentlemen, and our first panel will consist firstly of Susan, Councillor Susan Aitken will be on the panel, and then I want to introduce the panellists, and as they come to the stage, I'd like you to give them a warm welcome, if you will. So they are Peter Anderson, Chief Commercial Officer for AAC Clyde Space, Jamie Clyde, Director of Innovation Services at Brunswood, Dr. Sonali Mohapatra, who's the Quantum Innovation Sector Lead at NQCC, and she's Chair of the New Voices in Space Scotland, and Paul Winstanley, who's the Chief Executive of Census. Please give them a warm welcome. So a very warm welcome to our panel. And in this panel, we're going to be talking about Glasgow's innovation economy. And I'd be very grateful for those of you who are sending in your questions. They're all getting banked up here in the Slido mechanism. Questions about the innovation economy, new sectors and everything else. Please send them through now and we'll try to deal with some of those. But first, I'm going to ask those who haven't spoken yet just to tell us a little bit about your organisation, its contribution to Glasgow's innovation economy, and your current priorities. And Sonali, why don't you start?
Thanks very much, Greg. Hi, I'm Dr. Sonali Mohapatra. I'm the Quantum Innovation Sector Lead at the National Quantum Computing Centre. For the last 3 to 4 years, I've been very much involved in the quantum and space industry in Glasgow. I worked as space applications lead of the startup called Craft Prospect, which incidentally is sending up one of the world's earliest quantum cryptographic satellite, which is powered by artificial intelligence, and that's launching next year. It's one of the world's first small satellite missions to be enabling a quantum cryptographic ecosystem, and that's happening right here in Glasgow. With the appointment of Dr. Ilham Kashefi, the National Quantum Computing Centre right now has a formal footprint in Scotland, and with NICI is an initiative, which is a National Institute for Quantum Integration. We're building upon Glasgow's rich heritage of manufacturing, and we are setting up a national lab which is bringing together UK capabilities for the applications of computers such as quantum computers, which are already in the market, and we are trying to solve some of the most complex and challenging problems in the UK economy. I myself are specifically looking at quantum computing applications, how it can transform healthcare, how it can transform space, how it can transform our capabilities from transport to manufacturing to even net zero challenge and climate emergency. As the chair of New Voices in Space, one of my key priorities has been ensuring that we assess the skills gap that exists in the economy at the moment. We assess the talent gap, and we start taking a three-pronged approach: inclusivity, building in enthusiasm in school children from all sectors of society. And so we are collaborating with various different organizations to bring satellite kits to schools in low economic zones of Scotland. We are working together with the Space Scotland and various other organizations to roll out an equality, diversity and inclusion guidance pack for startups. And we are connecting them to professionals who will be able to take a leading approach in assessing Glasgow's skill economy. And I'm glad to say that Glasgow actually has quite a strong heritage of building a strong talent pipeline from University of Glasgow, from University of Strathclyde, and it's known as a photonics arc. And incidentally, photonics contributes around more than £12 billion every year to the UK economy, and it employs twice as many people than the pharmaceutical industry and also more than the fintech, space, healthcare industry as well. And this is something that we are trying to capitulate on and ensure that we are building quantum awareness, we're building the skills necessary, we're building the infrastructure as well as the technology, and hopefully we will together be able to solve some of the most challenging problems that are upon us right now. Thanks very much, Greg.
Great, Sonali, thank you very much indeed. I think we give her a round of applause, don't we? So I was lucky enough to sit next to Sonali last night at dinner, and I hadn't realised that Glasgow is becoming such an important, globally relevant centre in quantum computing. So thank you for explaining all of that to us. Paul, may we come to you next, please?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I just had to check. I'm delighted that I took my price ticket off the bottom of my shoes before I started. Good morning. I'm from Census, Centre for Sensing, Imaging Systems and Internet of Things. It's one of the 7 innovation centres here in Scotland. Fun fact, 4 of the 7 innovation centres are actually headquartered here in Glasgow. Another one has got a substantial presence in Glasgow, and another one exists in the city region. So a substantial asset, particularly strong individually and collectively at 3 things. 1 is innovation support, 2 is the provision of skills, and 3 is actually our ability to convene and bring big groups such as this together in thematic areas. In terms of what are we doing and what are we contributing, I'd like to sort of focus on the innovation support, both in terms of the public sector contribution and the private sector contribution. One of the things that is very noticeable from our work, that innovation support is not a single one-off activity. It's a sustained, it's an enduring activity. And we're beginning to see some really quite substantial success from this. If I talk about in economic terms, I've been in my role just under 4 years. Right at the start of my journey here in Glasgow, I used to work with a company, 2 people who were hot desking in the Tontine. Today, they're 30 plus people, they're growing rapidly. They're a company called Crucial, R3IoT as was. And what we actually did with them in terms of that multifaceted, sustained support, we really offered them three things. Their product is still based on technology that we provided with them as part of that innovation support. Secondly, we actually provided them with opportunity, not grant opportunity, but customers. And thirdly, one of their investors, they will openly admit the reason they invested in them is that we put a call into that investor at the right time saying, there's a really interesting company that you should take a look at here. So that multifaceted support is really, really important. If we look at where we sit today, we've been doing some benchmarking recently, and I work in a sector which has got a recognizably high attrition rate of company failure. We're actually riding 40% above the UK average for sustaining companies. So it's not about the creation, it's about the growth. That's where we create real sustained value, and actually that's what my organization is really good at doing. In terms of the public sector, some awfully tragic news earlier this week about the impact of social housing and mould. We've been very proactive in how we can actually manage conditions such as that through technology. We've run a number of pilots and we've supported a number of companies very proactively in that area. Two final areas. Collaboration is immensely important to me. We actually live and work in a city where there's an awful lot of support around, so how we work with others is really important. It goes really quite deep into my personal, into my organization's genes. So one of the things that we did do that to evidence this is we were the co-founder of the Smart Things Accelerator based out at Sky Park. Now 24 cohort companies showing some really quite significant potential. Councillor Aitken touched on productivity, inclusivity and environmental. There are ways of combining all of these artifacts together into propositions. That's something that we're very actively engaged on now, and in particular we've been working closely with Scottish Government to develop a proposition for our manufacturing sector. Again, significant portion here in the city, but the important factor is they're very small companies. So how do we engage with those very small companies, reduce their cost of business, principally focused on energy, but then how do we use that to engender curiosity and get them onto a digital transformation path where we can pull up their productivity? It's touching those 3 points. Thank you.
Great. Paul, thank you very much indeed. As I was listening to your maths right at the beginning, I think I counted, therefore, that 6 of the 7 National Innovation Centres are somehow in the Glasgow City region. Right. And I think that's obviously a testament to what the opportunities are here. Peter, great to have you here on the panel. Tell us a little bit about your organisation, how it contributes, and your priorities.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm Peter Anderson. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of the AEC Clyde Space Group. But today I'm actually here to represent a company that is local in Glasgow in the West End, also based at Sky Park, called Clyde Space Limited. Clyde Space was set up by Professor Craig Clark, who's now Professor of Practice at Strathclyde. Craig worked in the space industry down in England and wanted to come home. And actually, it was really the innovation that attracted him to come back to Glasgow. But really that outlet of innovation, the commercialisation of it, was something that he focused on. Cut to 15, 20 years later, and we sit here now as a global company, and we specialise really in taking that innovation and pointing it towards the market. We're a huge exporter. I think about 95% of what we do goes outside of the country. We're very well known globally, and we spend a lot of our time really then working on what we want to do with that and how we want to take that and do something different. Our whole priority at the moment, I think, really is about how we use space to improve people's lives on Earth. How do we make space more accessible and actually provide that out into the market for companies, for startups to innovate against? There's a big barrier of entry still in space, and it's primarily commercial. You know, it costs a lot to put spacecraft in space. You know, the innovation that we've taken advantage of in the city here, we've had an uninterrupted collaboration with Strathclyde University for over 15 years. We've worked really well with those guys, and we've been able to put a lot of the innovations there into our products, into our services, and actually then sell those on. You've actually heard 2 companies today, and it's another thing that we do is we take a lot of folk in from the local area. They get a lot of experience, and then, while we don't take any actual direct benefit afterwards, Spin Out was Crucial and Craft Prospect are two companies that were started by ex-Clyde employees over the years. I can give you perhaps one good example of where we have taken the innovations of this city and done something really special. So we work with NASA over in America, and we do a mission called Seahawk, where we take pictures of the ocean. So we're looking at the ocean color and the health of the oceans around the world. It's a freely available service. We do not charge for it. This is something that the scientific community can access. What is really interesting about it is it's actually funded in the background by the Gordon and Betty Moore Institute, and anyone who recognizes the name knows that that's the sort of founders of Intel. And this big kind of Moore's law of technology halving in size and becoming twice as powerful every 2 years or something like this. The spacecraft that we put up there outperformed its predecessor and was around about 60 times smaller in terms of mass. This allowed us to do it at a cost point that actually made it more commercially viable to address the challenges that we're facing. And I think that's the challenges we're all facing when we address various things like the net zero targets, and any environmental thing is always around how much it's going to cost. And that's what we're really focusing on. So we're part of the Green Freeport bid here in the city. We have applied, and we actually leverage Scottish Enterprise a lot, by the way. They're a great organisation for helping to co-fund our innovation. We think we've put about £10 million in the last 5 years and grown our business to around about 100 people in Scotland. We are hopefully soon, I probably shouldn't say this because we're public, so we'll get in trouble, but we're about to announce a new deal where we're going to be looking at offshore wind. We're going to be looking at how we take data, AIS data specifically, tracking ships, and how we use that to help to lower emissions as well. So alongside we've got a few business lines where we just sell parts. We're very commercially driven, which is mainly my role in fairness. But, on the other side of the business, we focus a lot on what we can do. And just as a final note, and maybe we'll get into it, skills, people, that's a big challenge at the minute for us. So really in real priorities, it's making sure that the city's investing, and Sonali mentioned it earlier, on STEM and making sure that folk realise that space is there and you can get a job in it.
Great. Peter, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The reaction from Slido to what the first 3 of you have said is a kind of wow reactor. I think people really didn't know what the concentration of these leading industries is in this city. And people do want the answer to the question, what needs to happen in skills, Peter? So you're on for that in the second round. Jamie, let's come to you. Susan's already mentioned the important work that Bruntswood is doing in the city. Tell us the story of Bruntswood in Glasgow. What are you contributing and what are your priorities?
Yes, good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Jamie Clyde. I'm the Director of Innovation Services for Bruntwood SciTech. We're a property business based in Manchester, 50-50 joint venture between Bruntwood Group and Legal & General. We specialise specifically on tech and life sciences, and we provide innovation campuses around the UK. We're actually in 7 cities now, and we have 11 campuses in those 7 cities. This is our first city in Scotland, and we're very excited to be here. Effectively, what we provide for about 500 tech and life sciences businesses around the UK is a combination of workspace and lab space, and support the growth actively. We've got teams of people in each of the campuses that provide a range of business support services to help them start, scale, and for larger businesses to innovate. We, as Susan explained just a few minutes ago, were attracted to the opportunity earlier in the year when the Met Tower became available. We saw that the cluster development for the tech sector in Glasgow was developing fast, and the core ingredients that we look for were in place in terms of what we call the treble helix. So a strong academic development and activity in the 3 universities. At the same time, strong commitment from the City Council towards the tech sector. And at the same time, an emerging tech sector. Just for example, I think the number of new vacancies and new jobs in the city related to tech is around 28%, so a significant proportion of activity and some leading areas that we've already heard about in terms of tech sectors. So those combinations we thought had very interesting ingredients. What was missing, it's already been highlighted, is obviously the shift in terms of demand for space and the need for a center, a hub for the tech sector in the city to bring together the different parts of the sector. So the new Met Tower building, when it opens in 2024, the end of 24, so about 2 years' time, we've got a major refurbishment program. And as Susan said, it's a listed building, it's an iconic building in the city, so we need to respect that history and at the same time create modern facilities designed specifically for tech businesses. And that will have a combination of different types of space, from a desk by the day or by the month, through to serviced offices, through to managed offices where the company can spec their requirements and have it fitted out all in a packaged way, in a flexible way, due to conventional, conventional office leasing. So allowing businesses to grow from the entrepreneur escaping their bedroom as they grow and become large, successful organizations. We want to support that growth trajectory through the business and at the same time have a dynamic community in the tower that is feeding from each other as well. So in all our campuses, we're focused on having that mix of startups, scale-ups, and corporates that are wanting to be part of a tech community and have access to entrepreneurs. And we see that as a very important part of creating that community. So the building itself will have all those different types of spaces, but it'll also have a restaurant, cafe. We'll have active travel facilities, so showers and secure bike lock-ups and changing rooms, as well as yoga facilities and wellness center. There will be chill-out rooms, and in the top floor we'll have an event space and meeting spaces. And we'll curate a program of events which will be not only for people in the tower and the businesses who are there, but for the broader tech community, because it's really important, I think, to drive strong sense of collaboration, interaction, and celebrate success that individual tech communities are creating, because that builds on the reputation of the cluster and supports the inward investment and the growth of the sector overall. So we've started on this journey. We've had an incredible welcome. It's been phenomenal, to be honest. The warmth of the city has really resonated. We're excited to be here, and our first step in that journey, alongside obviously the building and redevelopment program, is actually mapping out the ecosystem, understanding all the great resources that are here already, and we don't want to duplicate those in terms of the resources we'll be providing in the tower. We'll be navigating to those resources, like the ones, for example, that Paul was mentioning earlier, but and adding to those where we see there are gaps and opportunities to do additional support.
Great. Jamie, thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, the panel's going fantastically well, but the audience has submitted 39 questions. So the way we're going to do this is as follows. I'm going to read to you what I think are the 10 or so key themes coming from the questions that are relevant for this panel. And audience, bear with us, because you've asked great questions about housing, transport, cars, and a broader set of, as it were, city government issues, which we'll tackle in the second panel. I've got a particular question for you, Susan, that's coming in a moment. I'm going to read you the questions. You think of the two you want to comment on. You're going to get about 2 minutes each in total, right? So on the one hand, a big set of questions about what kind of global connectivity does Glasgow need to support these new edge sectors that you've been talking about? Where do we need the direct flights to, etc.? A series of questions about how do we both have collaboration but also IP protection in this space. Very important question. Big question, Sonali, that I think is being directed towards you is about what do we need to do to have more female entrepreneurs in this space? Forgive the pun. A set of questions, Peter, coming back to your point about skills. People are asking, how do skills need to be reorientated for this new set of sectors? Picking up on something you said, Paul, there's a question about, well, what are going to be the key growth sectors for the future? If you look 5, 10 years down the road, what do we need to understand about that? And then a lot of people saying, how can we participate in these new economic models? Okay, so coming back to those in a moment. Susan, the question that keeps coming in for you is around the green economy as a sector. Where should we go to attract more investment into the green economy? You've talked about Glasgow's, world-beating Green Print initiative. Everybody thinks it's fantastic, but how are we going to secure the higher rate of investment that's required to make the green economy ambitions real? So would you like to start with that?
Yeah, and it's absolutely a focus for us in the City Council. It's a space that local authorities aren't really used to operating in. Glasgow City Council has an award-winning, highly experienced inward investment team who do incredible work, but they have tended not to operate in the space of investments worth £10 billion, for example, and that's what we're now looking at, the kind of transformation of the city through the green economy, and then the job and growth opportunities and very high quality job opportunities that flow from that. It is something that we are getting our heads round, along with just about every other city in the world, apart from maybe some of the mega cities. We tend not to operate with those kinds of scales of money. So some of the work that we're doing with 3CI that I mentioned earlier is absolutely crucial. It's about understanding how we scale up, but also how we get all the things that we know we need to do in the city. So whether it's physical infrastructure, like retrofitting, 350,000 homes across the Glasgow City region require to be retrofitted. That's probably one of the single biggest investments into the physical fabric that would get us towards net zero. Energy transition's another one. And just talking about those, you can think of the full range of jobs and skills that are going to be required to deliver that kind of stuff. But also thinking about the likes of the fashion and textiles opportunities, their transition as an industry away from being incredibly unsustainable to try and be much more sustainable. Understanding how we position ourselves in that space in a way that gives these big institutional investors confidence that this relatively medium-sized global city is somewhere they can invest in, not just with confidence about the security of their investments, but crucially about the quality of what they're going to deliver. That was a message that came through to me really, really strongly at COP27. The investors I was talking to were saying, we're not interested in greenwashing. We want to know that if we're told it's a green project, we want to know that there's monitoring and quality assurance in place so that by the time it's delivered, it remains a net zero or as close to possible net zero project. So we're putting a lot of investment and a lot of work into making those connections and having those conversations. My colleague who I work very closely with, my equivalent in Bristol, Mayor Marvin Rees, who's a force of nature. He has, Bristol has something that I'm very jealous of. The council owns half of all the land in the city, and they were able to use that as collateral to get funding into their Bristol Leap, which is an energy transition in the city, £1 billion of investment they've got into Bristol, a fantastic project. We're going to work really closely with them to see how they've done that and we can replicate it in Glasgow. But in order to get that in, Bristol had to invest in the region of £17 million of their own money to bring the £1 billion in. And it's that development funding space that is, I think, the real challenge. How we know what we need to do, we know what we need to deliver to get to net zero. How do we get it investment ready? Where do we get that development funding from? So the work that we're doing through 3CI. It's still hard to say. It's easier than Cities Commission for Climate Investment, but it's still quite, through 3CI, the work we're doing there is trying to have conversations with investors as early as possible, as upstream as possible, so that they can work with us on that development. And that's crucial as well. You know, we're not necessarily the experts in this. We don't want to go to them with a proposition and they go, yeah, no, actually, you're going to have to go back 2 years and unpick it because that's not quite what we're looking for. If we work with them as early as possible, we'll get the right proposition for them, the right proposition to deliver for the city in terms of our net zero transition, but also what I am absolutely determined to do, the right proposition that will deliver economic and social transformation for Glasgow at the same time, through skills and jobs pathways, addressing some of those long-standing social challenges that we've lived with in Glasgow for a long time. So it's a huge agenda, but I know that we're, and the sheer felicity, we could not have invented it. What COP26 has given us, you know, it is hard to overstate how important it is and how much it's put us ahead of the curve of other cities right across the world in having those conversations, and the opportunities are absolutely massive. But we do need to make sure that we put all of the effort investment into positioning ourselves exactly where we need to be so we're not wasting time and resource.
Susan, thank you very much indeed. Really clear answer, and we're so glad to have you as part of the leadership of that 3CI initiative. Peter, let's come to you. 2 minutes, 2 points. Which ones do you want to make?
I'll talk a bit around what you invited me to, I think, probably, which is skills. Scotland, I don't have the exact figures off the top of my head, but what I do know is a sort of per capita level. There's more people working in space in Scotland than there is anywhere else in the UK. We're leading the way, and we need to keep the momentum going. Now, that's actually largely in part due to already an excellent support network, both here in Glasgow, but wider in Scotland. I mentioned Scottish Enterprise earlier, but there's lots, and the Tontine was mentioned earlier. There's a lot of really wonderful things there, but we're a global business, and that's what's making it hard. Because space, you know, you can't turn on the news for 2 seconds at the moment without Elon or someone like him up talking about space. And it is a global employment market as well then. You know, it's a high-skilled job. It's very easy to get your visa. It's very easy to move. So this is one of the, you know, alongside our own desires, one of the reasons why we focus so much on what we want to use space for, because we want to attract the right people to come and work for us. I think when it comes to skills, and one of the things I wanted to really kind of come here today and say really was STEM is fundamental. We can never stop investing and never stop supporting it, but it's the long play. It's always the permanent long play, because you need to start when kids are really young, and you need to bring it through, and you need to make things accessible. Companies like ours need to have the internship program. We need to be bringing people through, but it doesn't help like the here and now all the time. And I think one thing, and I actually myself came from the oil and gas sector as an engineer and kind of came across into this side of the space business, but it's really just making people aware that A, we exist, B, you'd be surprised at just how easy, I mean, I'll get told off for saying that, but you know, it is relatively accessible for a lot of different skills. And again, Scotland is just coming down in those skills, you know, in terms of engineering and entrepreneurship, and really there's so many companies starting up. And I think just again as another point that, and I'm not going to say too much because I think Sonali raises where you need to, you know, I'm sure you'll come in on this, is the startups and actually that kind of grassroots movement is so essential, and it has been shown to support diversification in industries. It's where innovation is born, and actually it's something that we really believe in and really try and support ourselves. So we're very much always putting our hands up and being involved, and we're one of the founding members of Space Scotland. You know, we put in as much as we can. So I think I'll leave it there, and hopefully pick up on a few other things later.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Sonali, let's go straight to you then. 2 points, 2 minutes. What would you like to pick up on?
Yeah, I think I'll start with how do we get more women in those tech sectors. So I think it's a nice segue in from what Peter just said. Skills, building those grassroots level skills is very important. And realizing that 51% of our human resources is women, and that we shouldn't be leaving that 51% of human resources out of a particular sector is really important. But what does it really mean? I often say that, you know, the actual work happens in the boring details, and these boring details are your bathrooms safe for women? Is the space, the architecture designed for women? Are we dividing up the emotional labor equally between the different genders? Are we getting away from those binary ways of thinking? And more importantly, like, how are lunch table conversations like in our workplaces? I think Glasgow, and Scotland especially, doesn't have a dearth of female role models. We have some very, very, very strong female role models, and we can look at them and say that's amazing. And I think for a long time, all of us have very much grown up empathizing and understanding and walking in the footsteps of male role models. And I think it's time that everybody, the other gender, from the other side also, they get to walk in the boots of female role models. And let me also drop in some stats here. So UK-wide, if we do a survey of what enthusiasm levels are in terms of specifically women in STEM, looking forward to then going up and doing higher education, 40% of women, much more than men, say that they want to go ahead and do higher education. So the problem is the problem is not that there is low enthusiasm. It's not that people do not want to go ahead and do this. There are some high barriers to entry into those various sectors, and those barriers can come from right from the childhood, as Peter was saying. We have to ensure that there's enough pictures of women and men in our textbooks, enough representation of what does a scientist look like, what does jobs in space look like. It's not just a researcher, it's not just an astronaut. So a lot of the work that New Voices is doing is making sure that we're taking role models from the sector that belong to a certain community and getting them to speak in those communities, and ensuring that school children, little children from those communities are able to ask questions, any questions. And I think we just need to stop asking weird questions to our little girls in the sense that, oh, is that going to be difficult? Do you think you are overachieving or overambitious? I think it's great. Let them be overambitious. Let them do as many mistakes as they can, because that's exactly how they will learn. And I think one of the things that women often feel, or not just women, like any representative from communities which have been kind of left behind in one way or the other, is that they kind of hold the onus of representing the whole community rather than just themselves. And that kind of strips off the flexibility of being able to be wrong, disastrously wrong, right? And so growth happens a bit less. So I think it's like, if you see somebody, a little girl who's interested in STEM, in any kind of STEM or even art subjects or social sciences, then go and just connect them to somebody else who's a little bit older but looks like them, so that they can talk to them and get a bit of that enthusiasm. I'll just drop a final comment here before I move on. I think connectivity is really important. Talking to your connectivity point, one of the things that Space Scotland has been trying to do is ensure that our photonics arc here, our space arc in Scotland, is very well connected down to the London-centric industry there down south. I think there's been a disconnect for many years, but we are working on that. We're building all the bridges, and we are making sure that there is a constant back and forth of talent, there's a constant back and forth of infrastructure, and we are developing the whole supply chain at the same time. And we also need to be developing the careers very equally. So there's as much need for project managers, for marketing people, for people who are in the engagement teams, as there is for scientists, teachers, and engineers as well. So we need to make sure that we're covering this whole surface rather than just a slice of the pie. And that's something that we've been working on. And the final thing before I stop is that, and this is very important, at the recent National Quantum Technology Showcase, Glasgow, a company called M Squared, which again spin out from University of Strathclyde, they have unveiled UK's first ever commercial neutral atom quantum computing platform. And that's being developed in Glasgow, and that's the first one in the UK, and that is going to generate a lot of growth and a lot of really good applications of quantum computing in Glasgow as well as in the UK. Thanks for that, Greg.
Thank you. I feel like it's... I was going to say it's nearly time to start cheering, but yes. Jamie, let's come to you, and then Paul, will come to you for the final comments. And I hope one of the things you'll comment on, Paul, is the connections and what matters for Glasgow. But Jamie, which 2 points do you want to pick up on?
I was going to pick up on connections.
Good.
And
Go ahead.
obviously skills.
Yeah.
If I do skills first, because I think every panel ends up with skills, because it is the big issue. And Digital did a survey, a report a few weeks ago that quantified in the UK, the skills gap is worth 50 billion to the economy. So in terms of, the budget yesterday and the sums of money and the budget gaps, it's that order of magnitude. And I think it affects not just tech businesses, but all businesses and all of us at different levels. I have to salute Sonali. I think you covered a load of points. I would say everything she said with women applies to the broader community, because at the moment, tech is a sector and it should be everybody. And we need to expand the pool of talent, both in terms of actual tech skills, in terms of coding and data scientists and so on, but more broadly, we all need tech to do our job. And that same survey said over 50% of us don't believe we have enough tech skills and training to do our job today. So this is a massive issue. I think in terms of reaching out to communities, I think it's not just we have to engage female talent in tech, but in reaching and outreach to communities in parts of the population that traditionally don't come from tech backgrounds, don't understand tech, don't see that tech could be a career for them. We need to reach into those communities, working with organizations that understand those communities and plant the seed of the scale of that opportunity. I think is really important. I'd just also pick up on what you said. A third of skills in tech businesses are not tech. We've got a big shortage in project managers. And if we're scaling businesses, talking to investors, a big problem at the moment post-COVID is sales skills. And a chief revenue officer is not a role that people actually know about much and necessarily respect in this country. We have to cultivate that talent. Without salespeople and chief revenue officers, we won't create scale-ups. So it's not just this tech skills for tech businesses. On the connectivity side, we're looking at inward investment around the UK and where we're resonating in different parts of the world. We're seeing a lot of interest from India, a lot of interest from Canada, from Australia, Singapore, a lot of English-speaking countries looking at the UK as a natural entry point to Europe. So tech businesses in these countries being very interested in the UK. The first challenge always is to explain that the UK is not London, that other places exist, and other places are arguably better than London. And I think with Glasgow, we have to sell the basis that we're a strong regional centre and perhaps reach to parts of India and these other countries which wouldn't necessarily recognise themselves as being capital cities. So in secondary cities that will resonate more with regional centres like Glasgow.
Great, thank you very much indeed. So big issue there to pick up when we talk about the airport in due course. Paul, let's come to you if we may. Your reflections, 2 points, please.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. In terms of the key growth area, we've got an enormous opportunity in terms of environmental sensing. We've got great academic prowess through the universities of Strathclyde, Glasgow and others, particularly looking at how we measure the amount of CO2 that we can sequester. That has got a huge ramification. We can take away speculative trading. We can trade based upon real data. That can impact greatly on land use. So it's a contribution that we could make as Glasgow into a very large area in Scotland. So that's probably my key growth area. I think that growth area also, it showed me something recently. So I'm heading pretty quickly to my sort of 40th year in industry. And for the first time, very recently, we had an outreach event focused in the environmental sector, run as a Newsnight style event. All of the participants were female. I've never, ever seen that before. So for some reason, the environmental sector is connecting. It is a lever we can pull. I've got one other point, but I'm going to stop there in fullness of time, I think.
Okay, well, we'd like to hear your 1 point. What is it?
Comments about IP. How
yes.
do we develop and share? Fundamentally, I'm lazy. I like finding things which exist already and reapply it. I was fortunate in the early noughties to work in and around the automotive sector. I was involved in development of brake-by-wire systems. All of the automotive OEMs wanted access to common, low-cost parts. They collaborated exceptionally well in the development phase. As soon as they moved to application, they became fiercely competitive with each other. That balance between development and application is absolutely crucial. If we put it into our context, we're talking to the National Robotarium at the minute about how we can sponsor some innovation challenges where we deliberately expose that approach. So I think there's lots of lessons that we can learn.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Now, Susan, there's about 17 questions here for you, but I think they all belong in the next panel. So with your blessing, I'm going to call a halt to this panel there.
Yeah.
We'll pick up public transport, affordable housing and all of that in the next one. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Councillor Susan Aitken, Paul Anderson, Jamie Clyde, Sonali Mohapatra and Paul Winstanley. Thank you very much indeed. Now, as you get ready for our second keynote speaker of the morning, I want you to get your Slido account out again. So get into that Radisson Guest Wi-Fi, go to Slido, SOCE 2022, hashtag just before that. The question I want to ask you is, why is Glasgow a great place to start up a new company? And we're going to build a word cloud. So you write in whatever you think is important. Is it connections? Is it talent? Is it creativity? Is it enterprise? Is it investment? Why is it that Glasgow is a great place to start a small business from your point of view? And if you see a word in there that you like, you just repeat that word yourself, and that word will then grow in our word cloud. And over the next 15 to 20 minutes, we'll keep this open for a little while. Our word cloud will gradually grow. Now, we know people make Glasgow, and people also make business, so I'm really not surprised to see people in there. But please keep going and building the word cloud, and a little bit later on, we'll have a look at the final answer. So we'll keep going with that, but we'll take it off screen now, because it's a great pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker of this morning. You've already heard who he is. He's the Chief Entrepreneur of Scotland. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the State of the City Economy Conference, Mark Logan.
Well, thank you very much, Greg. You know, it's interesting the word people appears on that word cloud, and we say that people make Glasgow, but Glasgow should make people too. Glasgow should enable people to flourish, and to flourish you need to have interesting, fulfilling work to do, and for that to happen, people have to start things. So that's why it matters that we become a startup city. So we're going to explore in the next few minutes, how do we become known worldwide as a startup city in a startup nation? What strategy would that imply that we need to be following, and what concrete actions might flow from that? Now, the first thing we need to do is start to think of our entrepreneurial system as a system. You know, for a long time in Scotland, we've had a lot of well-intentioned initiatives, but they've been isolated across different groups in government, agencies, other stakeholders, and they haven't really been coordinated, and they haven't been as effective as they could be. If we take a systems view of this, it means we can all cohere around the same model of how the entrepreneurial ecosystem actually functions. We can use the same terminology to exchange ideas. We can even agree on what the output of what we're doing is supposed to be. And that allows us to collaborate in designing interventions that are not just complementary, but mutually reinforcing. So we're going to examine in the next few minutes what a system view means and why that can be useful and valuable to all of our combined efforts. And we'll start at the very kind of highest level here. Now, even this simple diagram conveys a lot of power, because first of all, it defines what it is we're trying to achieve from an output perspective. We're trying to create more startups reaching their natural state of scale. Now, what does that mean? It means that not every startup should become a huge company, of course, but every startup should get to the point where it could have got where it started in a more large-scale, mature ecosystem like London or Silicon Valley. If they can do it there, the same startup should be able to reach the same point of scale here. And that's not always the case in Scotland today. There's certain barriers and there's certain absences of support that we need to put in. So this is a definition of what we're trying to achieve. And we can already see on the left-hand side of this diagram that to do that, amongst everything else, we need to make sure we have a sufficient supply of talent, entrepreneurial talent, going into this system. If we don't do that, then no amount of incubators or other initiatives is going to really make any difference. We need that foundational talent. What does that mean? It means that we need to be switching on young people and not so young people to entrepreneurship as a career, to normalise entrepreneurship in the nation. And we're not doing as good a job of that as we could in this country. I think we all know that. It's also a great opportunity that if we can do a better job of that, we can create the foundations of a really strong entrepreneurial ecosystem. So that's the inputs, but of course the other thing that affects that output is this box. What happens in that box? How can we improve and optimize how the ecosystem works? So I'm going to take next an example from the tech sector. We've talked about tech quite a lot this morning, and use that to show how we can take a concrete systems approach and what some of the benefits are that flow from that. And then I'm going to come back up a level and look at the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem in Scotland and apply a sort of systems approach to that at an initial level, because we don't have time to obviously do justice in great detail to that. So the Scottish tech sector, from a systems perspective, has partly come from a definition in the Scottish Technology Ecosystem Review, which was a report published a couple of years ago. And it had the task of saying, if we treat the ecosystem as a system, what system interventions can we make that are mutually reinforcing to give us more startups, more scale-ups, more quickly? And that report identified about 30 recommendations that aimed to fulfill those goals. And at the highest level, it viewed the ecosystem like this. So essentially, it's a funnel. And on the left-hand side, we have a relatively large number of very small kind of pre-startups, 1 and 2 person, not yet companies, ideas that might become companies. And as we go from the left to the right here, the first thing that happens is that some of those pre-startups actually become startups. Some of those startups go on to become scale-ups at different levels of scale, through to the so-called unicorn level and beyond. Now, there's obviously a narrowing of this funnel, a natural narrowing rate, because not every startup should become a scale-up, for example. So we expect the funnel to narrow. But in Scotland today, the funnel narrows too quickly. So what that means is that some companies that should have started don't start. And it also means that some companies that got to a certain level of scale didn't get as far as they would have done in a more mature tech ecosystem. So that gap between the actual and the natural narrowing rates is our opportunity gap. And what we need to do is identify policies in a coordinated fashion across our different stakeholders that close that gap. Now, what might be the nature of those policies? Well, the ecosystem, the tech ecosystem and many others, depends on 3 main areas. The first is, if you can see that at the back, there's ecosystem infrastructure on the left. Ecosystem infrastructure is both the physical spaces where people can actually start companies, and it's also the social infrastructure, the networks where we learn from each other, where we build confidence and identity. These comprise infrastructure. The education funnel in the middle is about, first of all, saying, do we have enough children at school who are, for example, interested in programming and proficient in doing that, the way they do in a lot of countries in Eastern Europe, for example? At university level and college level, are our technical students actually interested in entrepreneurship? Do they consider that as an option? And do we equip them with the skills so that they can either start their own companies or they can join startups with confidence? And even beyond the education system, at founder level in their early stage startups, do our founders have the same level of technique and knowledge about how to grow a company as, for example, their counterparts do in the Silicon Valley? And the answer today in Scotland is no, no, and no in all those questions. Now, it's not a binary thing, but we know we could do much better here. Now, over on the right-hand side is the funding funnel. Now, funding comprises, of course, grants, but it also comprises investment at different stages. And in Scotland today, we have a mixed picture. We struggle to get scale-up capital to our companies. We do a better job in the earlier stages. So when we think about this system like this, the question is, what are the interventions we should make collectively across all the stakeholders to start to strengthen those dependencies, to strengthen the ecosystem? And I'll give you just a few examples briefly. We've heard some great examples today of some fantastic initiatives that are happening in Glasgow. over on the left and infrastructure side, at a national level, we're launching this month a network of what we call tech scalers. These are incubation environments for startups that provide long-term incubation. They also provide world-class founder education, back to this education point, which has been sourced from some of the strongest educational resources in the world, so a lot of it from the Silicon Valley, for example. They also include entrepreneurs in residence to support the startups. They include town square areas where we can hold meetups and essentially start to build a network and share knowledge and confidence with each other. They'll work complementarily with our accelerators, etc., which are already in existence. And they also act as another concentration point for investors to come and see some of our best companies. Now, to illustrate how when we have the same model, we can start to align our interventions, we're also working at the moment across all of the development agencies in Scotland with the TechScaler network to integrate grant funding natively into this environment so that a company that's curated for entry into a TechScaler is also automatically assessed for grant funding at the same time. It's a small but powerful efficiency for startups who are usually under-resourced, but it shows that when we start sharing the same model, we can start to build platforms, entrepreneurial platforms, and those platforms are powerful, and we can use them in ways that we haven't so far done, as I'll illustrate shortly. So on education, for example, just briefly, we're working to make computing science a peer of mathematics at school, as opposed to the poor third cousin as it is today. At university level, we're working to bring in the entrepreneurial campus definition so that universities are recognised for excellence in switching students on and normalising entrepreneurship. So there's a lot happening there. And over on the right-hand side, we are working across Scottish National Investment Bank, Scottish Government and development agencies to look at how we can, for example, cornerstone investment to crowd in additional scale-up capital. So a lot more going on, as we've heard, at city level, at national level. But the important point is the more we coalesce around a systems thinking approach, the more powerful and leveraged will our interventions be. Now, let's take that systems approach and say, how does that apply to the whole of Scotland or to the whole of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Glasgow or in Scotland, not just tech? So we can look at that quite simply at a high level like this, 2 dimensions here, and one of them is scale and the other is connectedness. So let's look at scale first of all. You can view that as having 2 extremes on a spectrum. At one end there's scale up, and you can't see it because of the chair here, but at the bottom is the scale deep. Now, scale-ups, I think we understand. Scale-ups are obviously valuable because they create hundreds or thousands of jobs, and they return value to investors, which causes more investment to come to the area. So obviously, we would like to have more scale-ups. That's kind of obvious. Scale deeps are just as important. A scale deep company is not going to scale beyond just a handful of employees, but its product or service directly benefits the community in which it's based, which is usually not the case with scale-ups. And that network of scale deeps is phenomenally valuable to our economy. It lowers the social security bill, it creates more well-being in our cities. Historically, industrial policy over many decades has tended to flip between these 2 states, a focus on scale-ups at the expense of scale deeps, or a focus on scale deeps at the expense of scale-ups. And that's a mistake. We need to focus on both, and we can. Why do we need to? We need to because these are actually symbiotic relationships. For example, the more scale-ups we have, the more success stories we have, the more young people and others are attracted into entrepreneurship. It becomes something to give us belief and excitement about. So we need to have those scale-ups. But we also need those scale deeps because unless we normalise entrepreneurship as a way of life in Scotland, there won't be enough founders emerging to give us those scale-ups. You could think about it a bit like this, that you can't grow giant redwoods in a desert. You need to tend to the forest floor. The forest floor is where they come from. So our entrepreneurial policy in Scotland, in my view, needs to focus on scale-ups and scale deeps equally. And actually, at least in the early stages, the needs of both are the same. So again, we can use the same platforms, exploit the same platforms to do that. Now, the other dimension here is connectedness. I'm going to zoom in on this line a little bit. So we're now zooming in. There we are. Fantastic special effects. This is the same line, but we're just looking at it more closely. There's two elements to this connectedness concept. The first is foundational interventions that we can make. Now, foundational interventions are foundational because when you make them, they affect and improve every domain of entrepreneurship. A good example of that, we just heard some great comments from Sonali about how we get more women into entrepreneurship. And we need to address the appalling gender imbalance in entrepreneurship. And if I can add my 10 cents to that, I think we need to start by stop trying to fix women. If only women were a bit more entrepreneurial. That's not the problem. Women aren't broken. The problem is that when we make statements like that, that contains the very roots of the reasons why we have the imbalance. And we've got to wrestle with our own sexism as a country, and for that matter, our own racism, because the same things apply to excluded minority groups as well in entrepreneurship. So we need to do a lot in that area, and we need to do it realistically, really embracing the issues, not trying to fix people that aren't broken. Now, the other thing we should be doing foundationally, of course, is we should be teaching our children and young people about entrepreneurship. Now, both of these things will increase more talent into that ecosystem. At the domain-specific layer, let's have a look at an illustration of that layer. Now, I've put 5 domains on here. Of course, there are many more. These are just for illustration. The important point here is that these need to be connected. And, we don't do a great job of that in Scotland today. We could do better. So, for example, we tend to hold them apart. But here's a question. Is Moderna a life sciences company or is it a tech company? Well, it uses massive AI engines to analyse biology, so it's clearly both. Could Moderna start in Scotland today? Or how about Pixar? Is Pixar a creative industries company or is it a tech company? Well, again, it's both. Now, in Scotland, we have a strong life sciences sector, but we tend to hold it in academia and not expose that life sciences sector to the same expectations or exposure to entrepreneurship as we do, say, the tech sector. Our creative industries boast 2 of the strongest institutions in the world when it comes to making more creatives in our city and in our country. But those jobs usually manifest later as freelancers or small isolated groups of freelancers. We need to, again, bring all these groups together into the same infrastructure, learning from the same sources about entrepreneurship, because real creativity, real innovation, we talk about innovation a lot, innovation happens in the gap between domains, not within domains, and we've got to exploit that, and we can do that with the same platforms. So when we come to talk about platforms, the importance of this is that, as was very eloquently articulated earlier by Susan, we have less money to do more things with. And I believe that if we think in the ways we're talking about here, if we recognize the symbiosis and symmetry between scale-ups and scale-deeps, if we recognize the connectedness between domains, then we can use the same entrepreneurial platforms, the same incubators, the same education resources, the same networks to do a lot more with what we already have. So that requires us to coordinate better, to share the same systems view of things. And I would urge us all at city level and at national level to really embrace that. People do make Glasgow, and it's about time we returned that favour to them, I think. So, thank you.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Not only did you give us an amazing insight into how a startup ecosystem can really work, but you reminded us that Glasgow plays a special role in all of that. So thank you. Mark's going to stay on the panel. Susan is going to rejoin the panel. And now we're going to be joined by Susan Achtemel, who's the founder and executive director of Homes for Good, by Alison McRae, who's Senior Director at the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, and Andrew Moultrie, who's Chief Executive of BBC Studio Works. Please welcome them. Now, we're going to run this panel in a similar way to the last one, except that Some of the questions that were asked earlier on, I had to save till now because we need to ask the right questions to the right people. So we will be going back to the top of our list of the Slido polls. So Susan, I will be asking you questions about public transport, and Susan Actimel, I will be asking you lots of questions about housing supply and housing affordability. And we've also got a whole series of questions about the interesting challenges between getting people back into the office versus actually during a cost of living crisis, is that the right thing to do? We'll come back to all of that. But before we do that, let's give Alison and Andrew and Susan Actimel a chance just to tell us a little bit about what they're currently doing, what their priorities are, and how they're contributing to Glasgow being an innovative city. So, Andrew, would you like to start?
Yeah, hi, I'm Andrew Moultrie. I'm the CEO of BBC Studio Works, and BBC Studio Works is a commercial subsidiary of the BBC, and our job is pretty much to generate additional income for licence fee payers. We are a standalone entity. We're not funded by the licence fee payer. And we have the ability to work across the whole of the sector. So we work with everyone from BBC, ITV, Netflix, Amazon, etc. as far as our industry is concerned. What we do specifically is we provide the facilities, the equipment and the people to make telly. In essence, that's what we do. So we bring ideas to life. And what we've done here recently, as Susan alluded to, we've invested in the opportunity at Kelvin Hall. And why was Scotland the opportunity? As we were reviewing the business as I came into it and looking to go pan-UK as part of the Ofcom regulations within levelling up, I looked right across the UK, where do we go to next? And the one place where I saw the utmost unity, focus, investment and community was in Glasgow. And we had the conversation and we're exactly on the same page. More than that, it was the approach to the infrastructure and the skills and the importance of sustainability. And I don't just talk about sustainability from a green footprint, it's about people. My business is a people business. The creative sector is a people business. And it's so important to have that sense of community, and I'm so stoked to be part of this as part of the Team Glasgow opportunity, because we've now been open for about 6 weeks and the studio is humming. It is doing so well. But more than that, the look on people's faces when they see Kelvin Hall reimagined, as a Kiwi, seeing what's so important as an icon, I didn't really appreciate it until I came up here and I walked the streets and talked to the people. And the depth of association was there, but more than that, it's the depth of community. Which then comes back to what's important for me. Fundamentally, you can appreciate, I'm a people person. It's all about people, all about communities, it's all about depth, and about the skills gap. And beyond what I'm hearing today, a lot of the academia and the statistics, I work in an industry where it's from bogs and boilers all the way to live TV output. So the opportunity is really broad, and it's the ability to get into television isn't just about being in front of the screen, it's being behind the screen, but actually supporting the whole infrastructure. So my business and the skills gap that we have isn't just about high-end university qualification, it goes right through the whole ecosystem, where there's an existential threat for the whole of the UK, is if we don't have the skills to deliver the crafts that we've been doing so well for the last 10, 15, 20 years, if not 100 years as far as the BBC is concerned, all of that investment is going to go back to the West Coast. So we need to fill the gap, we need to maintain the purpose and the opportunities and the quality of the craftsmanship that we've been delivering, but we need to do it at pace, and we need to change the way that we approach the education and the introduction of people into that ecosystem. And that's what I'm passionate about. So thank you.
Great. Andrew, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Let's give him a round of applause as well. Alison, let's come to you, if we may. Tell us a little bit about what the Chamber is doing to make Glasgow even more an innovative city and what your current priorities are.
Thank you very much, Greg, and it's great to be here today. Well, I look after strategic partnerships for the Chamber, and I suppose to some extent what we do is look for opportunities for the business community and the city and dive deep into those themes. So I suppose one of the things that the Chamber does, which is a really important role, is its convening ability, and Susan mentioned earlier on the power of the business community, and that's something we pride ourselves in doing because we have extensive networks locally, nationally and globally, and we like to bring that intelligence in to help the city, to help with creating solutions to challenges we have in the city. We're also pretty agile and responsive, and we try to be as creative as we can with those networks and that problem solving, but we also help support the city's ecosystem development, and some of that's been touched on today. So if I could give you a couple of examples, if I may. So the first, let's take the example of the work we've been doing in the circular economy for the last 7 years. And actually, we believe that we're an early adopter, and certainly we believe we're possibly the only Chamber of Commerce in the world that's actually taken a frontline role in that to get the ball rolling, as some of our members have been, like Beauty Kitchen and Balfour Beatty, just to name a couple. Now, from the outset of that, our motivation of getting involved in that space was it's about innovation and it's about future-proofing your business. And particularly in this kind of climate that business is in at the moment, where costs are soaring everywhere, there's a real competitive advantage to be had, and I think that's really important to note. We've now got over 250 members in the Circular Glasgow Business Network, and actually that's a really great ecosystem to work with, as knowledge transfer and collaboration and people joining forces. And we heard from Austin Smith-Lord just at the end of last week at one of our anniversary for COP26 events. And our partnership with ReLondon as well, which again is probably a slightly surprising addition to that. So we're really passionate about scaling that. The second example is around the work we're doing in youth employability. And I guess to some extent, again, to coin a Derek-ism from the airport, is about dot joining. And to some extent, some of the work that's been happening to help inspire our future workforce for our future economy, some of which we're discussing today, to get those right skills is about pairing with the business community into schools. And we know that 2 touch points with a young person in a school with a business has a greater influence than actually teachers or parents or carers. Digital Critical Friends was born out of Mark's original Scottish Tech System review, and we've got companies like JP Morgan, University of Strathclyde, all involved in that. And actually My Climate Path 2, where we're looking to tackle the future skills that we need to see coming through the city as we tackle the not insubstantive climate challenge that the city faces. And then the final point is actually on the convening power that I made the point of at the beginning, where the city has many strategies, as indeed does the national government, and the city, through the backing of our members, have taken the view to support 10 key projects which will be critical for the future economy of the city, but some of it will be very relevant for the innovation economy, one of which would be the supporting of the 3 innovation districts with the University of Strathclyde and the University of Glasgow, getting Peter Duthie and his team the next stage investment for SEC campus development, and thirdly, supporting the airport and its recovery, but also some of the really innovative work that the team is doing there in the ambition to net zero. So that's just to give you a flavour.
Yes, thank you very much. And Susan, coming to you, welcome to the panel as well. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Homes for Good and how that's contributing to Glasgow being an innovative city and your current priorities.
Okay, thank you. I think the clue's in the name of Homes for Good, isn't it? I'm the founder of Homes for Good, and I was so delighted to hear Mark talk about scale deep businesses, because that's what we are. We started in 2013. And we operate in the private rented sector space. So there are 2 elements to Homes for Good. The first one is as an ethical, values-led letting agency. So we manage just over 200 properties on behalf of landlords in the city. And the second aspect is around creating a portfolio for people who really need homes, who can't readily get homes. And to date, we have bought and renovated about 350 properties in the city, mostly dilapidated properties. We've brought about £20 million of investment into Glasgow as well to do just that. And so home is my thing. And home is the foundation for all of our lives. That's our strapline in Homes for Good. It affects our health, it affects our safety, it affects our relationships, our connectedness to communities. It's our starting point for absolutely everything. And we don't have enough homes in Glasgow just now. That's the way it feels. That's what we can see. And it's obvious from the questions. It's the second highest priority for the room today. Our population is increasing. In October, Homes for Good had 300 inquiries for every property it listed on Rightmove, and we only had 5 on Rightmove. The demand is off the scale. Strathclyde University and Glasgow University have students sleeping on floors of friends' houses. Students sleeping in the Gurdwara. There is a homelessness crisis among students. When have we seen that before in the city? And my guesstimate, because I somehow can't find the right figure anywhere, is that social housing waiting lists with our housing associations in Glasgow are probably in the region of 30 to 50,000 people. The housing market is in a whole pile of turbulence, and demand and supply is off the scale. All of the economic levers around house prices and interest rates are not helping. Government intervention at a UK, national and sometimes local authority level is not making things better, it's making things worse. And sometimes the unintended consequences, and we hear unintended consequences quite a lot, they are avoidable if we all join up, and the joining of the dots that Derek has said, and we have creative thinking. And what I want to see in the city, and what's my priority, is that government is absolutely an enabler and not a preventer. And I know from talking to Susan that is the way forward, and that is the way that certainly the City Council is thinking. To come on and just talk briefly about social enterprise, I was delighted to see that the ambition for the city is that Glasgow will be the social enterprise capital of Scotland in 2028. Well, my announcement is that it already is, as far as I'm concerned. So we're there. And the definition of social enterprise that the council has articulated is beautiful, actually. It's economic activity that works for people, and the profits are put back into the environment and social change. And that is absolutely what social business and social enterprise is. We have over 700 social enterprises in the city with an annual income of 1.1 billion. We employ 10,000 people and have 6,000 volunteers. We're buoyant, we're resilient, we're determined, and we're creative, and we're optimistic. And we do need to put social business at the heart of the city, as Mark mentioned, in the different domains. In terms of innovation, the challenge is, the thing about innovation and the definition of innovation is challenging how things were done before. It isn't all about invention and brand new things. It's about tweaking and processes and bringing ideas from industry and from each other and different sectors together. In the core cities, Glasgow is top of the leaderboard in academic achievements, in the calibre of our universities, and the number of people that live in the city with degrees, in our employment rates. We're bottom of the leaderboard in economic activity and in business start-up rates. Now that is a huge opportunity. That challenge is a huge opportunity to bring those things where we're brilliant and the things where we need to do more together and do new things in new ways. And we have to do this to take care of our people first. We need the economic activity. We need to take care of our people first, and then we need to let them flourish.
Great, thank you. Before we come to Councillor Susan, though, I just want you to stay on the microphone, because I want to invite you, in a sense, to finish the answer to that question that everyone has prioritised secondly, and in a sense to ask you, as well as more of what you're doing, what else is needed to actually build the housing supply that Glasgow now needs for this growing population, these growing student numbers, this growing number of workers? What's needed?
All the ingredients are there, and we need housing across every part of the housing ecosystem. We need build to rent. We probably need more student accommodation. We absolutely need more social housing. We need faster planning decisions. We need more creativity. We need to repurpose quickly the commercial buildings that are now not going to probably be used for commercial purposes again. So we need that, all of the ingredients. There is money to do this. There are people who want to do it, and there are people who need homes and that can pay for the homes. All of the ingredients are there. The challenge that we've got at the moment are the economic conditions conflicting with government intervention. Yeah. And what that has done, and we saw that, and I'm not here to make a political comment at all, but we saw the reaction of the housing industry on the 6th of September to rent freezes. Every part of the housing industry was up in arms, and including the academics. Investment started to pause at social level, at build-to-rent level. So there is all of the ingredients to create more supply of homes, in my view, are there if we all collaborate and work together in the right way.
Great, thank you. And it sounds like Susan's initiative on repurposing buildings is just in time, by the sounds of it. Susan, coming back to you then, in your earlier speech, you talked about, that you have to live in a world of imperfect solutions. I think we'd like to hear more about that. But the top question asked by everyone today is around how we're going to sort out public transport, how we're going to get integrated ticketing across the bus network, integrated travel across different modes. And further down in the list of prioritised questions, there's the question about the delivery of the metro and everything else. Do you want to start with that? Because it's obviously on people's minds.
Yeah, and it's probably been one of the areas that I've spent, the policy areas I've spent more time on than almost any other over the past few years is Glasgow's transport system in the round. And you mentioned the metro, and just short of time in the speech this year didn't get round to mention it, but metro, the more and more we talk about it and the more we understand what that's going to mean, is actually a catch-all term for an integrated public transport system that reaches into every part of Glasgow and underpins our economy by connecting people with jobs, people with economic opportunities, with training opportunities, with education, as well as to culture and leisure to each other. And we know that Glasgow has some real strengths. Our suburban rail network is absolutely fantastic, but also real weaknesses. And bus has been a big weakness for Glasgow for a long time. We established a bus partnership quite early on in the last council term. As with everything, the pandemic slowed things down, but its first focus was the low emission zone. Because the biggest contributor to the low emission, to high emissions and poor air quality in Glasgow was buses. There hadn't been investment in Glasgow's bus fleet for I don't know how long. It was probably the oldest and dirtiest in these islands. It has been transformed. It has been absolutely transformed. I get the bus nearly every day. I am a public transport user in Glasgow and primarily of bus. The difference travelling on the new bus fleet is quite something. But that is just the first step. And we know that what has to follow is action around routes, around fares, absolutely crucial, around reliability and speed. And that's a bit, I suppose, that we know rests with us in the council. And we're putting a lot of focus and working with Transport Scotland as well on bus priority. Now that means, of course, that we sacrifice priority for people in private cars. That's the quid pro quo there. You want more efficient buses that get you to where you need to be on time. Then that means you need fewer cars on the road, causing the congestion that causes the buses to go more slowly. But I think actually bus times and efficiency are probably the biggest thing that prevents, I suppose, more folk like me, more affluent people, relatively affluent people using the bus. Because they're like, am I going to be able to rely on that bus to get me to this meeting? Of course, it's just as important for somebody who's going to the job centre for an interview, because the bus doesn't get them there on time, they risk being sanctioned. So it's actually a massive social justice issue as well. So we're big focus on that, and you get then hopefully a kind of virtuous circle. More people using the bus, then routes become more viable, and hopefully you can start to bring fares down as well. And there's a big element there of where we come in as the council. So from next year, we'll have the regulations coming from government that will allow us to understand what bus franchising looks like. We're already doing a lot of work with partners with the existing bus operators in the city to map that, so that by the time we do get the regulations, we know and can understand what it looks like in Glasgow. There are big barriers to delivering that quickly, not least the fact that because there haven't been municipally owned buses in Glasgow for, 40 years now, we don't have any buses. Council doesn't own any buses to immediately start running And that's not a cheap thing for us to buy. Linking back to previous discussion, I did have a very good conversation at COP27 last week with someone representing a group of institutional investors who have decided that they're going to put their money into municipal bus infrastructure. I was like, here's my card, give me yours, let's talk. So, you know, those kinds of conversations are going to be absolutely crucial to realising this. On Metro, on the new transport mode, which will complement and enhance and join up all the bits in between where the buses and the trains don't reach, and again, hopefully get more and more people out of private cars and into low-carbon public transport. Again, not something overnight, but we're making considerable progress working with Transport Scotland on that, really moving forward. You may remember that, I've lost track of time, it was just at the turn of the year, the Scottish Government's Strategic Transport Projects Review 2, STPR2, had Metro front and centre as a national priority for transport delivery. So it's not just, this is not just a Glasgow project. It's not even just a Glasgow City Region project. We've worked very hard to get recognition that investment in connectivity in the Glasgow City Region is investment in prosperity and social justice for the whole of Scotland. It is a crucial investment that will generate all sorts of beneficial ripples right across the nation. So, yeah, early days for a project that will take us decades to deliver, to get to the point where we need to get to. But when we get there, we'll have a bigger footprint than Manchester's Metro, which itself has taken 30, 40 years to get to the point where it is, and will actually be one of the biggest public transit systems in Europe, and will finally bring Glasgow and indeed Scotland up to match our European competitors. But it's absolutely crucial that, you know, I am very excited and 100% committed to that new public transit system, but we still need to keep working on the accessibility, the affordability, the reliability of our good old existing public transport system, which for the vast majority of Glaswegians does mean getting the bus.
Great. Susan, thank you for setting that out so clearly. Lots of people in the room were waiting for the answer there, and this was the right time to do it, so thank you for that. Now, there's another question here that I want to pitch, if I may, to Mark and to Alison. How can we mainstream new economic models that prioritise the well-being of people and planet instead of simply pursuing endless economic growth? And Mark, I thought from your perspective as chief entrepreneur, it would be good for you to talk a little bit about whether you see that it's essential to move entrepreneurship models in that direction. And then, Alison, you may want to say a little bit more about Glasgow and the circular economy and how that's moving. So,
yeah, thank you, Greg. I think the first thing we have to recognise with the obsession for growth that we have in our economic model is that all through history, with growth comes greater carbon emissions, never the opposite. So we have a real problem with this issue of growth. And I think we have to be willing to challenge what we mean by growth. You know, we have a situation in Britain where the economy grows, but people get poorer. So that's not a growth that I think most of us recognise as the growth we want. We have a country in the UK where the growth comes from essentially value extracting financial services. There's good financial services and there's value extracting financial services. And the British economy in the last 20 years has been built around the latter. And we're paying the price for it now. You know, this crisis we're in has been coming an awfully long time. So growth itself isn't bad, but the twisting of growth into what we've done is bad. You know, we need to grow companies to a certain size so they can make impact. You know, do we want our wind power companies to stay small? No, we want them to be big. Do we want our solar panel companies to stay small? No, we want them to grow big so they can make the impact we need. So growth inherently isn't bad, but an obsession for financial return-based growth is causing us an awful lot of problems. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I'm certain I know what the question is. Are we ready to confront that and talk about what type of growth is good, what other models exist? We're not having that discussion just now in the world. We're not having it in Britain. We've got to start having it. You know, at universities, economists are teaching students that the only thing that matters is growth and not adding any kind of flavour or nuance to that. So we've got to stop that. We've got to have a real discussion about what type of growth is sustainable and what type is harmful. And if we don't, then nature will decide for us. So this is a pressing discussion.
Mark, thank you very much. Alison? So Alison, take what Mark's just said, and if you like, give us some practical examples of what the Chamber is doing with the circular economy, for example.
Well, the circular economy as a principle, from our point of view, is about sustainable economic growth, and I think that's probably the slight sort of nuance and shift, and that's ultimately about being better for all and that just transition. And I know just transition's thrown about a lot, but if I may, I'd love to give you an example which I suspect many people in the room might not be aware of, which is in support of Glasgow as an innovation city. And if I take it slightly off stage left to Team Glasgow in the front-facing way, where you would see the city working its magic, picking up on Andrew's point, he was captivated by Glasgow because of Team Glasgow's approach. You've got the Games, you've got COP26, you've got UCI coming up. Glasgow can make magical things happen. Now, one of the things that's been happening behind the scenes, which includes climate intervention with schools and climate heroes being matched in to show the jobs of the future, is a combined ambition actually by Glasgow City Council's Education Department and the Chamber, and our networks and business and social enterprises have a huge role to play in this ongoing, is about getting people into positive destinations as part of that just transition. And literally 3 years ago, the city at that point was at 92.4% of our young people leaving to go into a genuine positive destination. And in 3 years, that really brilliant collaboration that Glasgow does so well has resulted in a dial shift to 96.2%. It's the first time Glasgow's ever been above the national average in Scotland in terms of how our young people are getting engaged in a constructive way because of that partnership. And so much of that is going to be about climate and actually getting people into the jobs as businesses are pivoting on circular economy with new business models, tackling climate change. So it's probably a slightly surprising answer to that question, but I think it's a good example of Glasgow's innovation in action, and it's all about Team Glasgow and the magic that Glasgow can make happen.
Alison, thank you very much. And that allows me to put directly to you the question that's number 5 on the list at the moment, which is, what are the skills gaps for the transition to net zero, and how do we reskill people to meet the targets that the city has? I guess that educational initiative is part of that, but what else is required?
Well, I mean, for a start, we've got nearly 60 climate heroes working across secondary schools, across the region, actually, at the moment, and it's all sectors, all different businesses who are absolutely genuinely committed to transitioning on climate into net zero, using circular principles if it's in that particular area. I think at the end of the day, it's about working that out as the things are changing. So some of it's not anticipated, and that's a good throwaway line, that actually jobs of the future in the next 10 years, most of when we won't be able to tell you what the answers are. But I'm going to anticipate that we're going to see more in the space of design. So I'm expecting Glasgow School of Arts graduates to come out and actually be instrumental in changing how manufacturing's done, working with NMIS and so on and so forth in the innovation districts, right through to technology. But technology in the round, we talk about digital a lot. I'm talking about tech in terms of physical tech, digital tech and biotech. So those kind of areas are likely to be the spaces that we're going to see many more jobs coming through.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Now, Andrew and Susan Actamel, there's 2 questions for you. They're currently 2 and 4 on our audience's list. So one says, new innovative jobs are great, but there's a shortage of basic skills that keep the city going. Bus drivers, retail staff, hospitality, etc. What should be the plan there? And the second one is, how do we plan to ensure that young people are not left behind with the skill gaps that could be huge in sectors such as digital and green? I'd love to hear your reflections on that, perhaps starting with you, Andrew, some comments from you, Susan.
I think it's a massive dilemma, because there is a continuum as far as the skills gap is concerned. It's not one thing, it's many things. And it's more than anything, is you're getting and I think what will underlie all of this is with any of the skills process and the education process is the machines have come and the machines take over, which they have done and they are doing. The fundamental purpose or the engagement with people is through connection, social skills. And in order to really operate in the future position, you need to have those social interactions. You need to be human in order to really progress in any of the environments we're talking about. And that's not being taught anywhere in the education process. The principle that Anne-Marie and I were talking yesterday specifically is about being generous and about kindness and about the emotional intelligence and about how to be social and how to have a conversation and be okay to express yourself and bring yourself to work at every single occasion. And I think that's being missed in the whole education sector. I think the opportunity to bring yourself into the environment as you are, however you identify, is becoming more comfortable, but it hasn't been completely adopted on that basis. And that's leading to, I think, a polarization as far as skills gaps and skills shortages across the whole of this. I work in an industry which, when I came in 3 years ago, 75% white male over 50. I'm a white male, I'm not 50 yet, but I'm getting into that. And part of my role is actually to ensure that I don't lose all of that knowledge that has been generated over decades and decades of experience, but provide the opportunity to bring it back into the ecosystem by letting younger people from all diverse backgrounds see that there is no barrier to entry to the BBC, which often has been thought about, but to the environment. As far as getting into television, you don't have to be in front of the telly to be successful in the environment. And the looks on people's faces as they're exiting my industry, as they're looking to retire, to bring the next generation through, is phenomenal. But it's providing those opportunities. And now I'm in a position where I can challenge all the unconscious biases that are going on there about your resume, about your approach, or how people, what university you went to, what you didn't go to. Say, well, actually, let's bring people in. Let's give the opportunity to give them that experience to ensure the pipeline of opportunity isn't just limited to a few. And there's no funneling of that approach because you didn't get your GCSEs, you didn't get a diploma, you didn't get to university, you didn't go to a postgraduate opportunity. It's more, even at a home level, no, you're only good with your hands, so you're only going to be my job is all about craft, physical and mental. And if we can provide the platform for people to see that and the opportunity to do that, which we are doing now, I think Glasgow, with its history of being physical and having the grit and determination to do stuff, will really make a change in the creative sector on the whole.
Very interesting. So you anticipate, in a sense, a whole new approach, really, to this kind of skilling that builds on that heritage.
I'm all about disruption.
Great. Okay. Susan, your reflections on that then, thinking about the industries that you're involved with at Homes, thinking about Homes for Good. Is there a risk, firstly, of young people being left out? Is there a risk that we end up with some people gravitating towards these highly productive industries and lots of other people not able to participate? What do you think the remedies are?
In terms of Homes for Good and what we have had unprecedented challenges with recruitment in the last 12 months that I assume and I know is happening across the board everywhere. But thinking specifically about construction, and that construction is everything from a new build housing development of 600 units to trying to find a good painter or decorator. And it feels to me like there is disconnect around training and around paying conditions and around people's... I don't think there's any shortage of people who want to be economically productive and who want to succeed, and particularly with young people. But it's then the opportunities that are put in front of them. And when I was thinking about your question, which wasn't one I expected you to ask, so I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah.
I was thinking about my own daughters and their progression into work. And these jobs that we all rely on, the sort of entry level, or they're called sometimes unskilled when they're actually highly skilled. People working in hospitality and in retail. I see firsthand the paying conditions. Particularly the conditions, the 0 hours contracts, the lack of training, young people having to pay for their own uniforms. And it then ties into infrastructure and transport and how expensive and how long it takes to get from A to B across the city to do a job. And I think One of the things I'm proud of about Glasgow, when I started Homes for Good, I had the opportunity to start from scratch and have a sort of day one approach, as Jeff Bezos talks about. And I decided Glasgow already had the living wage, way ahead of the UK. And Homes for Good has paid a minimum of the living wage from day one to anybody that came into the company at any age. And that was 10 years ago. And one of my daughters is in management in hospitality and is paid less than the Glasgow living wage. So employers need to take responsibility to invest in their people as opposed to constantly thinking about their bottom line. That's, for me, if employers took a shift, and we're all employers and we've all got a responsibility to do it, it's not hard to do. That would make a huge difference. And I think also, just as Susan was saying, getting our transport infrastructure right has all of the knock-on impacts that enables young people to get to work and to be a bit more ambitious about where they can travel to. It's all interconnected in.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure the room agrees with that. Susan, we've got a couple of big juicy questions for you. And then what I'd like to do is end the panel with a bit of a conversation. I'm just going to set it up now because there's 5 or 6 questions here that are different aspects of the same argument. It's all about the working from home phenomena. There's one community of people here who are very concerned about the impact of working from home at the city centre. And why isn't the public sector doing more to get people back into work to revitalise the city centre? There's another group of people here who say that's absolutely crazy. We need people to work at home so that they can reduce their carbon footprint, reduce the cost of going to work. There are other people here who are really in favour of hybrid working, who think it's the perfect combination of the two things. And of course, all of that buys into the transport stuff that we already talked about. So in a minute panel, I'm going to ask you, where do you stand on this intriguing debate about what's the right balance between working from home, hybrid working, and repopulating the city centre to get it back to where it used to be. But before that, Susan, there's 2 questions and they're all about money. So one of them is about the Strathclyde Pension Fund, and it says the fund has 1.4 billion sub-fund, which is supposed to invest in the city. However, it mainly invests outside. Can we work with them to change that? And then the second question about money is about the UK government, and it says, how will Glasgow benefit from the UK Levelling Up Fund, and how is it setting priorities towards the fund when the decisions are taken at UK government level?
Okay, so on the first one, I would love to say yes, just unconditionally. I'll say yes with a little bit of a caveat. I think it's not just that sub-fund. I would like to see the whole of the Strathclyde Pension Fund being considerably more directed towards projects that will be tangibly visible and benefit their own pensioners, more than once. The pension fund obviously has a whole number of fiduciary duties and regulations that has to be incredibly careful to protect the pensions of the people who are paying into it. Both of my own parents are Strathclyde pensioners. I have no interest in seeing them or any others lose their incomes. So I have massive sympathy with them for that. But on the other side of it, and I need to be very clear, although the Strathclyde Pension Fund, Glasgow is a member of the Strathclyde Pension Fund, and one of my colleagues in the city government chairs it, we as elected members cannot instruct the pension fund in any way. What I can say is, and my colleague Ricky Bell, the city treasurer, who's also the pension fund chair, I think he's here somewhere today, orange shirt, he just made himself known. He and the board members of the pension fund are really looking at how this can happen. It's a case of, if not now, when. This is the time for Strathclyde Pension Fund to be investing in its own place, because this is also the time when the local authority in its own place, and indeed the business community, are producing projects that absolutely fit with what the pension fund requires for its requirements and all the assurances it needs that it's going to continue to deliver the returns for its members that they trust that it will do for them. But so the short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is it's something that we need to work on, but it's a place we definitely want to get to.
Fantastic. And then the Levelling Up
And
Fund.
Levelling Up, well, it's Glasgow put a bid into the first round of Levelling Up funding. I'm glad to see we were successful. That was a bid to, we got the funds for a project in Pollock Park and Pollock House, particularly to transform the stables at Pollock House. So it's a combination of a heritage, green project and a kind of future job creation project and culture project. Well, a whole number of things in there. We have put a lot of work, I have to say, and while, I'm glad the Levelling Up Fund is there for us to bid into, I would say I would really like, and I've said this to the UK government, don't do this again. If you're serious about investing in cities, just invest in cities. Don't make us compete against each other like this, particularly within very short timescales. Glasgow has been lucky. We've got brilliant capacity in our economic development teams, partly because of the City Deal, or in large part actually because of the City Deal. They're familiar with Green Book, Treasury Green Book business cases and how to do those. But they were having to pull together Treasury Green Book business cases for projects in the space of weeks that would ordinarily have taken at least 6 months to a year to deliver. So it's been enormously challenging. But I'm glad to say that we have, in the second round of Levelling Up, put in a bid for every single constituency in the city that we're entitled to put a bid in for, plus another bid for the larger transport infrastructure fund. And we've focused, they go from very big, so the larger transport infrastructure one is to put a roof over the M8 at Charing Cross, down to some brilliant stuff which we know works because we've done it before, about investing in local high street regeneration in some of our communities. So the one for the bid for Glasgow North, for example, has a big focus on regeneration of Saracen Street. A brilliant street in the city with so much potential. I think Saracen Street is, potentially a future Finnieston or a future Denniston. It has got so much potential. A bit of investment, working with the business owners there, working with the local community as well. I think, could absolutely transform that part of the city, and it's a part of the city that really needs that kind of investment into it. So that's just one example, but we've got similar types of, I think, fantastic Levelling Up Fund bids. What happens with them is in the hands of the UK government. We're confident that the bids that we've put in will not just generate GVA, but generate real social value and benefit and economic benefit in every single part of the city. We've done as much as we can to convince the UK government of that. I will be, if I can keep up with who's the current minister, relevant minister, I will be pressing on them as hard as I possibly can. The Glasgow projects are projects that genuinely will level up. They'll level up not just across the UK, but they'll level up within the city as well, in a way that I think will be really impactful.
Susan, thank you very much indeed. I know we're slightly running against time, so we're going to have about 5 minutes more and then we'll end. So the last 4 questions, I've already prefigured them. One person says, when's the Scottish public sector coming back to the office? Footfall is down in the city centre. The public sector are the largest occupier in the city. In a sense, the inference is get on with it. The next person says, why are people focusing so much on getting back into the city centre? Just causes extra stress during a cost of living crisis, and it takes away from local town centres. The next person says, why are people still not understanding and are opposing the value of hybrid working when the proof is that it's negatively impacting on the city's people? And then somebody else says, Scottish Government research says reducing the need to travel is important to decarbonising transport. How are we adapting our economy to embrace this concept? So that's the range of views we have in the room. A comment from each of our panellists, ending with you, Susan, starting, if we may, with yourself, Mark, and then we'll come down the panel. What do you think about this?
So I think it doesn't matter if you're in favour of hybrid working or you're not in favour of it, because it's not going away. It's the new reality. And we're not all going to work at home, we're not all going to go into the office. So we have to start dealing with that reality. The reason our cities are being hollowed out isn't because of hybrid working. It's because everybody in this room will buy most of your Christmas presents online from Amazon or somewhere similar. That's the truth of the matter. So what we need to start doing is saying, in that context, what should cities look like? And it's not all in our control. We're going to find that cities become de-emphasised. We're going to find that towns and villages rise up a little bit more as more shops and cafes open around where people actually are. And we're going to have to be inventive, like we've never been for 100 odd years, about what a city is. Is it more residential? Is it entertainment? They won't go away, but this change is coming. And if we don't address it, we're just going to end up with lots of Sauchiehall Hall streets, which I think we're all a little bit sad about. So, let's deal with the reality that's here now. Let's not fight that reality, and let's build from there.
That's a great start. Andrew.
Yeah, it's a hard act to follow up after that one. I'm in total agreement. It's here to stay, but it's up to the organisations and the individuals to determine what creates the best productivity for them. I think what hybrid working has created is the opportunity for parents, single parents, mums to provide the flexibility to come back into work and still be connected to their family, which is that need for the community, in order to ensure that your day isn't just lost commuting to work and missing time, quality time with your children to think about their careers and that engagement. I think that's where hybrid working has provided that opportunity and that flexibility to engage with the family more, which I think is vital to any growing economy.
I can see the stakes getting higher. Everybody's got to say something meaningful here, haven't they? Alison, your turn.
United Nations, here we go. Well, obviously we're a membership organisation, so we represent a whole range of different members across the city and the city region, and many of those businesses have different views, but there is definitely an absolute passion for backing the city centre recovery. It's been the engine room of our economy for a long, long time, and without question that is the first message. The second message is that absolutely flexibility is key, and this is going to bring out all the best of what Glasgow does so well, which is doing difficult things differently and actually being really creative and innovative, and by goodness we can do that because we're great.
Great. So I hear a reinvention of the city centre story beginning to emerge there. Susan.
So, so I'm definitely for hybrid. And I think that whether we work from home or whether we work in the office, there are pros and cons in all different aspects of people's lives. Somebody who is a professional who has got a home office in their fourth bedroom, which is a spare bedroom, has a different working from home experience from a young person flat sharing in a noisy flat. So I think I absolutely want to see the city centre brought back to life. And even down in London, you see the impact of Tuesday to Thursday is now, the working week in London. You see the impact on the city economy. But I think actually, as business owners and as employers, it's our responsibility to create the conditions and understand the nuances with each of our employees and work towards getting the best from them and having them feel the best that they can be in their own role, whether that be working from home or whether that be in the office. And we have to assume, in my perspective, in my opinion, that everyone wants to, we need to create the conditions for everyone to be able to work in the office if they choose to, but also have the opportunity to work from home if it enhances their overall quality of life. So we just need to have the balance.
Great. Thank you. Final words.
So hybrid working is only the latest massive structural change in the way that we live our lives and the way that society functions. There will be another one along in a minute. What we need is a city centre that isn't buffeted by all of those changes, but is resilient enough to withstand and respond to them. I think that the city centre that is we're in transition just now in Glasgow, that's what it's heading towards. And all of the investments, some of which I referenced earlier, and the major developments and redevelopments in the city centre, the investment in city centre living, the repurposing of buildings, that's what the outcome of all of that has to be, is a resilient city centre that survives cultural changes, fundamental societal changes, because they're happening faster and faster all the time. Just one final point on this. Ricardo Hausmann, who I mentioned in my speech, his Growth Institute at Harvard produced some stats for different cities, about 40 different cities globally, on how threatened their city centres are by, first of all, the decline in retail, physical retail, and in teleworking. And in both of those, I thought, if you'd asked me in advance, I thought that Glasgow would have come pretty high up on the lists in both of those, and we weren't in either. We were bang in the middle. So there was a lot of cities are better placed to deal with those than us, but there's an awful lot of cities, including major cities worldwide, that are suffering not just the same kind of existential crises in their city centres, but much, much worse. So Glasgow, with the work that we're doing didn't come fast enough to prepare us for the impact of the pandemic, but we need to keep at it so that we're ready for the next shock that comes along. And I think we're getting ourselves in a really good place for that.
Thank you. This just gives us one moment to have another look at our word cloud, if we may, that we had going on just a few minutes ago. Can we have our word cloud back up? That's the polls. We just want to see the word cloud on what makes Glasgow. There we go. So right at the heart again, people, innovation, community, talent, creativity. Thank you very much for staying till the end of the 24th State of the City Economy Conference. Please join me, if you will, in thanking Chief Entrepreneur Mark Logan, Alison McRae, Andrew Moultrie, Susan Acktamel, and Councillor Susan Aitken, the leader of the City of Glasgow. Thank you very much indeed.